A couple of years ago, myself and my wife, we felt like there was some big change happening. We both lived in Derry. She's a clinical psychologist, and I was an assistant pastor in a church called Cornerstone. And so we felt like God was doing something. We weren't sure what it was, but we felt like we needed to seek out that. So we began praying and seeking Him about that. We went out for lunch one day, and we started talking about my parents who had like a little group, a little prayer group together here of about 7 people. And it was like in the middle of that conversation, God like gave us a heart transplant. It wasn't like we got a call or we felt like, suddenly God was giving us direction. It was literally like God arrested us and said, you have to go. And so we looked at each other and went, both of us at the same time, we said, we have to go back to Donegal. So that started our journey. Talked to the leadership in Cornerstone. Took about a year to transition out of all our responsibilities there. And so in July of 2013, we moved back to a little town called Fulcarra in northwest Donegal. And so we started this amazing process of church planting. And one of the women, I want to tell you a story just to sort of is symbolic of the heart of the church. One of the women there, her name is Agnes. And Agnes was an alcoholic. She was scared to go outside. She comes from a history of abuse in her family and just awful situations growing up. But Agnes, over a couple of years, had an encounter with the Lord, came to faith, but then began this process of where God was restoring her and really blessing her and changing her life and transforming her. So Agnes is now married. Children that were taken away from her have been given back to her. She's not an alcoholic anymore, and she's not afraid to go outside. And this all came to its head about 2 weeks ago when we went out in the street in Fulcarra and we went out to pray for people. And Agnes prayed for over 40 people on the street in Fulcarra. And so what you're actually seeing is the transformational power of God in her, and then her living out what God has done in her to show others. And everyone was like looking at her going, this is absolutely incredible. We knew Agnes from before. Look at what's happened to her. So she had the opportunity of sharing her testimony and praying for these people. It's very important that we recognize that we're not building our church. We don't want a church called Killult Christian Fellowship. We don't want Killult Christian Fellowship to be a great church or to be known to be a great church. We want Jesus to be known as a great God. But as well as that, we want Christ to build His church. I think our responsibility that we very quickly realized was that we wanted to see more disciples. Rather than just attendees. So we don't want just people who are across the line. We want people who are fully living in what God has for them. And so one of the scriptures that really impacted us as a church was where Jesus gives the parable, and He talks about the kingdom of heaven is like the mustard seed that grows into the big tree where the birds of the air come and make their nest there. So the big expression has life, and it harbors life and draws life. But in the same measure, Jesus talks about the kingdom of God being like the yeast and the bread, and where that yeast goes through all of the bread and causes it all to rise. And for us, there's this great conviction that, yeah, we can have the big expression, and that's fantastic, but what God also wants from us is that in our own personal lives, that we're actually impacting the environment in which we inhabit. And so we had to make this shift from just having this idea of the corporate expression to actually a personal expression as well. And so we looked at the idea of having mission focused groups, and what that would look like for us. What we were thinking about would be like 2 or 3 or maybe 4 people in their communities forming little groups, but the whole idea behind it would be that they would draw people, or they would go to people. It would be people that wouldn't be already in church, and changing the focus from this midweek meeting to of just prayer and worship and the gathering of believers to actually we're focused on going out and connecting with people.